Let's keep it going with this next one, which when this premiered at Telluride, it felt like it was going to be the one to shake things up, the one that nobody saw
Yeah.
coming. I know it's based off of a book. We know that the writer is a pretty prolific writer.
Mm-hmm.
If this is the first time you're hearing about it, let's hope that Zach has some good things to say about Nickel Boys, because I heard that this may be the runaway hit of the year.
Yeah, I've been anticipating this one. As you mentioned, this is an adaptation of the novel by Colson Whitehead, and Colson is a pretty renowned writer. His another one of his books, The Underground Railroad, was turned into that phenomenal Barry Jenkins Amazon series from a few years ago. I read this one in anticipation of this movie, and it's really great. But then there's a moment that just sneaks up on you towards the end and got me in my emotions. Really made me tear up.
Book?
So I was in the book. So I was so excited for this movie, and then it kind of threw me for a loop, because this is not a very traditional adaptation, particularly of a book that is so literary and has so much to pull from. What director RaMell Ross is doing here is really singular and interesting. Now, RaMell Ross is a filmmaker making his narrative feature debut. He previously made Hale County This Morning, This Evening, which is a really interesting documentary that I believe was nominated for an Oscar a few years back, if I'm not mistaken. But he is entering the narrative world for the first time here. And he's doing it through a pretty interesting lens. This film is told basically entirely in a POV perspective, which he joked about not wanting it to feel like Hardcore Henry at the Q&A that I saw him with. He was instead referring to some other film. This is
them looking at themselves?
In a mirror. It's a film that it almost employs like the Jonathan Demme technique of people looking directly into the camera, because ultimately they're looking at another character in the film, and what that does is really put you in this perspective and get you centered in the experience of these characters. This is a story that chronicles a friendship between two black teenagers who have been sent away to a reform school in Florida. And this is based on a pretty notorious story of abuse that went on in one particular Florida reform school. And I forget the name of the actual place that this is based on, but there's all sorts of awful reports of abuse and bodies that were buried in the school yards and stuff like that.
Sheesh.
Yeah, so it's a pretty awful story. And here it's dramatized in a very interesting way, in that it reminded me at times of films like Son of Saul, and films even a little bit of Zone of Interest, in that it's not really lingering on some of the major atrocities that are happening. They're all palpable and they're all noticeable. Like you can't help but feel them and hear them and absorb them through the context of the movie, but it is not really lingering on those moments in the way that you might expect for a story like this. It is much more focused on these boys and their experience and how they sort of get through their time here. And I found that to be a really compelling way of shooting it. I mentioned that POV style, and it reminded me a bit of the cinematography in All Dirt Roads Taste of Salt, another one that we talked about on this pod from Sundance. You remember how All Dirt Roads was really focused on these like close-ups of fingers and hands and moments where people would touch, and it would just sort of linger there, not necessarily showing you the full scene, and you're hearing bits of dialogue. This has a bit of that too, in that like sometimes you won't be turned toward where the action is, but in a way that makes sense, because you're still in the room, you're still witness to these moments. And I think there are some people who might find the assembly a little bit distancing, because it doesn't spell everything out for you. You don't get everything in clean two-shot coverage where you can see every character say every line of dialogue. You kind of just have to experience it and feel it. And honestly, I found it to be so overwhelmingly effective. This was, to me, the best movie that I've seen so far at the New York Film Festival, and I've seen a lot of good stuff here already. I am really blown away by this achievement. It is beautiful, it's astonishing, it's incredibly powerful and deeply felt. And I just thought there's nothing quite like this movie. I've never really seen something like it.
Nice. I don't know if you had brought it up in the chat. They had said this is the same cinematographer as All Dirt Road Stays the Salt.
That makes a lot of sense. I didn't actually see that.
There you go. The way you were describing it, Steve McQueen, Amazon Prime.
Oh, Small Axe.
Yes, the one where they party. Remember?
There's elements of that too. Yeah. In that,
like,
it's just sort of these moments.
Yeah, they won't linger on the like trauma or like the negative sides of it. It's like they're on the outskirts and they go back to rocking.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of sounds like that. Like it's only trying to remember the good memories, but obviously there's borders of bad.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's entirely trying to be just the good bits, but it's not indulging in those
Gotcha.
in those worse aspects. I mean, they're certainly there, and I wouldn't say this is like an easy film to watch, but it's also not like it has this kind of like ethereal quality to it. It feels really like stream of consciousness in a way. And particularly when you get into elements that foreshadow things later in the film, I thought it was just really brilliant in how it puts it all together. I do think there are going to be some people who come away from this movie and don't really get everything that happened because it's not spelling this all out for you. But it's all there. It's all really expertly told. And it's just like, it's so evocative.
This is great. I know there was footage out.
Yeah. They dropped a trailer the morning that I went to go see the movie.
Wow. All right.
So yeah, and one of the interesting details that they talked about during the Q&A is that even though Jomo Frey, the cinematographer from All Dirt Roads of Salt and this, is responsible for a lot of the look of this film, the lead actors, Ethan Harris and Brandon Wilson, shot a lot of this movie because it's from their perspective, and in a way they were responsible for a lot of the look of the film. And if you get a chance, I would highly recommend checking out the Q&A they did at the New York Film Festival, because they talked about how unique it was to be in both roles as an actor and kind of as a cinematographer.
That's fascinating. And we've been seeing a lot of those stuff. I think it was even like in Bad Boys where they put it on Will Smith to move around, and people don't realize the cinematographer has camera operators. So just make the actors the camera operators. That's interesting. Yeah. We got a date on this?
I believe this one is coming out this year. I mean, they're planning a theatrical October 25th, I think it sounds like. So hopefully we won't have to wait that long to see it.
Theaters?
If this one doesn't get nominated for several awards, there's something terribly wrong with the Academy. This is such a beautifully told film. I'm hopeful that it's gonna, be beyond just like a couple nominations. This should be a Best Picture candidate, Best Director candidate. Ingenue Ellis-Taylor, who we love in a lot of her roles, is probably going to be a supporting actress candidate as well. It's such a good movie, dude. Can't wait for you to see it.
I want her nominated 3 ways. To go back on what you had brought up earlier, his documentary Hill County this evening was nominated. 2019 documentary or nominee for Best Documentary Feature. It did not win. It lost to another one, I guess. So with this being on Prime, you are saying that definitely a theatrical experience.
Oh, yeah. This is such a beautifully told movie. Do not miss it on the big screen if you have the opportunity to see it. It's a special movie.